Ready? One, two, three. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Salesforce with Megan. In today's special episode, we have brought on a guest, Jordan Nelson. I probably don't need to introduce him, but I am really excited to have him here with us today. Fun fact, I actually have been following him since even before I started my own brand. So I've really enjoyed, Jordan, watching your YouTube videos, your recent LinkedIn Live, reading your newsletter, and overall your social media approach. A little bit about how you do approach LinkedIn. I like that you have inspired others during their Salesforce journey. You've motivated them, but you've also made it very personable and relatable, which makes it even more engaging and real. So, Jordan, I would like to just introduce you and have you tell us a little bit of maybe a fun fact about you.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously Jordan Nelson, and I have been in the Salesforce industry for it's going on, I think, 5 years this year. So kind of got my start over at a company called jet.com. They were purchased by Walmart e-commerce. And then I was working as a business analyst, and then just out of the luck of everything, they started pushing some of their responsibilities for Salesforce over to Salt Lake City. So I was over there at that time, got lucky enough to get some of those responsibilities. I was pretty sure that I knew a lot more than I actually did. Looking back, I only had like 20 badges, was not certified. And I was like, oh yeah, like I know Salesforce. So I started applying for some Salesforce admin jobs, and then it was able to get hired on at one of the startups here in Utah. And then from there, just kind of been, I guess the rest has been history. I think a fun fact about me is I thought I spoke Spanish until today when Megan was testing me on it. At one point in my life, I did something for the church that I attend and went out, and I was kind of forced at that time to learn Spanish. So I moved to Houston and lived out there for a couple of years, and then ended up moving back here to Utah.
Awesome. Well, I love your admin story. I like that whole vibe. Like, I got this. I got my badges. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
confidence is real.
it was definitely that moment where it was like, okay, yeah, like nobody else, like this, I'm the best in like my company here, and there was nobody that did Salesforce, so of course. And then yeah, I got that first job and really got rocked by the team that I was on. I was like, there's so much more that I need to learn. So it was a lot of late nights after that to try to catch up to them, but it worked out. So here I am.
Yay, I totally understand
Yeah,
there. I've been that in those late nights. Oh my gosh. Well,
for sure.
cool. So like I kind of mentioned in the introduction, I've seen you on social media from your YouTube days, and in particular that LinkedIn session. I actually learned a lot from you. So kudos to you. That's why my LinkedIn looks so good. Yeah. So I would love to be able to ask you, what inspired you to start sharing your story online, and how did you go about picking topics to talk about?
Yeah, really good question. For me, my motivation was I got into Salesforce. Like I just mentioned, I took that first role that was like full on admin. And when I got into that role and I realized how much more people knew than in comparison to me, I quickly realized what my strengths and weaknesses were going to be. For me personally, I don't mind doing things like this or putting myself out there online. So I was okay and comfortable doing that. And a big gap that I saw at that time is like on LinkedIn in general. I mean, this was 2017, 2018. There just wasn't the same content that you see now. And so I just had figured, okay, like I'm not great at doing these tests. I don't love doing that certification route. So kudos to everybody that does.
Yeah.
And then also knowing that, okay, nobody's really posting on LinkedIn. I just saw that there was a huge opportunity for me and the way that I was comfortable going about doing that, to start posting on there, and then really just trying to put myself out there. So the first goal was really not to really become anything like a thought leader or like really many opportunities. It was honestly just to kind of supplement my resume. And I figured, okay, if I post on here, this is where people are that hire for jobs.
Yeah.
So if I can make myself known a little bit more on this platform, then I have a better opportunity of landing a job than somebody next to me that doesn't, that might be more qualified technically, But I think when I post online, that shows a lot of the soft skills, like how I communicate and what I'm interested in. So that was kind of the whole reason behind it and how I got into like wanting to post. As far as the topics, first, it was just whatever I could think of. I think I just started like resharing things and posting like random business updates, like had nothing to do with what I talk about now. And just trying to get a feel for it. And then a lot of the journey has probably been that, where it's been, okay, what am I good at? What do I like? And I think the more and more you post, like the more comfortable you end up getting. And so kind of fast forward now, I think now at this point, I feel pretty comfortable to just be like, these are the things I'm interested in. This is what I'm going to post about. If it does well or it doesn't do well, it's okay. Like I'm fine posting this, you know? So I think that's kind of the way I've gone about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember the first time I posted and I was literally like, okay, enter, click, I'm going to do it. It's so nerve-wracking at first. But it is very true what you say, because the LinkedIn game has, and I talk about this often, like the LinkedIn game has totally changed from 2017, 18, right? You look at it during the pandemic and after the pandemic, and it's more visuals, it's more interactive, it's more genuine, which I have seen just content evolve over time. So it's also been really cool to see how your content is evolved too. I see that you have started doing like little animations and like drawings, and that's more that's like super interactive, and that gets people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the idea behind that is I've followed some other creators not related to Salesforce, just in general, people that I admire. And one thing that I've really loved, a lot of them will kind of talk about the same principle, but just the idea behind really trying not to compete with others, but just being yourself. And I think if you do that, you end up being just by yourself, you stand out, you're more unique. And it takes all that competition away. So a lot of the things that I think at this point that I've like consumed, a lot of it will say something along the lines of, you know, if you're finding yourself in a lot of competitive areas, chances are it's because you're copying too much, right? So it's like for you and I, like for an example, like we talk about a lot of the same topics, we're both in the same industry, but for my approach versus your approach, they're going to be completely different. And I think as long as you continue to be yourself and myself, we don't run into anything. And I think it makes it kind of cool, because then there's things like this where we can collaborate on, and it doesn't feel like we're bumping heads or like trying to steal each other's thunder. It's just, you have your approach and there's an audience specifically for that. And then there's going to be things that I'm interested in and the way that I'm going to approach it. And that's going to bring a different audience, right? So I think just trying to go about it that way, like you said, of, you know, maybe not so much getting so afraid of posting and feeling like you have to copy, versus like, what is it that I'm interested in general? And how can I apply this to something that might help others, right? So I think that's a good approach anyways.
Yeah. And I think over time, like when you do start posting, you attract people who want to hear from you. Like they just genuinely like how you post and what you say. And what I loved about your approach and my approach is that we're just genuine. Like we just put up stuff that we enjoy talking about. And with that, more people just want to hear about it. I love sharing I think personal stories are probably the ones that I think are not going to do good per se. I'll be like, I worked on a flow today, almost like walked out 5 times. I can't do this. Shut the computer, throw it out the window. I don't know, whatever. But like those end up doing really good. And I'm like, well, okay then.
Yeah, exactly. And that is pretty cool. I do like the personal side that you put a lot onto it, of, you know, sharing and being more vulnerable, I think is a big thing of it, to where, you know, in general, like social media, like there's so much just noise out there and fake, and it makes it really hard for somebody, especially in our industry where there's a lot of people that are trying to get into it or learn or pick up from others. So it doesn't help the fact when you're just trying to inflate or embellish on like who you really are, what's actually happening, because it gives people like the wrong idea of what to expect going forward, right? So that was something I saw a lot with, you know, other creators. I liked David Liu, who's someone I looked up to a lot. Obviously, a ton of people do. Bradley Rice was another one. And then just outside of that, Jack Butcher is another guy that you said. He's not anything in Salesforce. He's a graphic designer, but anything he does, what you just said about the mindset, it's like, that's me with him. Like anything he posts or puts up or like tries to sell, I'm like, you can count me in on that, like anything he does, because you kind of find that vibe, like you're saying, and it's like, okay, yeah, like this guy, his mindset and what he wants to work on and what he likes, it's like almost all the stuff that I like. And so you end up showing up for that person a lot more than just, oh, I'm here for like a Salesforce tip. It's like, no, I like the way this guy thinks and what he does. So yeah, I'm here to support him, right?
Yeah. People like the real people. I think it's really important in our industry. And I like how we both talk about this, but it's showing that you don't need to just post your certifications. Like, I want to know if you failed a flow.
Yeah,
Threw your computer out. Like, I just want to know about those things. And I think that's what I've enjoyed even before starting like my own brand. I've loved watching like and just reading your content about that. And that kind of comes into my next question. What has been the most enjoyable part of creating your brand, and then also challenging? And then if I'm throwing too many questions, let me know. But how do you deal with content wall? I call it a content wall, like creation hits. So I'm just like, well, what do I talk about next? How do you deal with the good, the bad, and then that wall hits?
Yeah. Okay. So the good and how I go about it. I think for me, going about just like posting content in general, we kind of touched on that, but it's what I try to pair up are like three things basically. It's just, what are my interests? So like naturally, without anything else, like what do I try to look up? Like what do I Google? What am I just like naturally on my phone about? So there's like that sector of it. And then there's, my personal preference on things. So like my style. So it's like, what you said with like the graphic design stuff that I've been posting. It's like, yeah, I like that. I like that clean aesthetic, minimal look. I've always enjoyed that type of style with things. So I've been trying to introduce that a little bit more into like what I've tried to talk about. Yeah. I like the philosophical side of things, like mindset, growth. I love talking about that. That's something I could talk about all day with anybody. Yeah. And then obviously like your skill set. So mine happens to be a big one right now for what we do is Salesforce. So kind of taking those three things and then finding like the middle of all of those and how can I actually translate something helpful online for somebody else using those three topics, right? And so I think that's what kind of ends up showing up throughout my content, which is like what we said, a lot of like this growth mindset. How can I think about something different? And then what I've been trying to introduce is like this different idea of like showing you how you could kind of like picture something different with the graphics, and then focusing in on like the skill set that's going to hopefully help you like achieve more goals in your life. So that's kind of how I go about like the approach piece of it. Yeah. Your second question, or maybe it was the third, it was your content wall. I think the next one's coming to me. That one, I think it's like good to call out that like no matter what, and as consistent as anybody is, that I think you're always going to hit that wall. Yeah. I mean, even like tomorrow, like I try to always talk about on Fridays, like what I'm going to post about in my newsletter. And it's like, I feel that way like tonight. I'm just like, what am I going to like put in this newsletter, And then sometimes it becomes where you're like almost feeling kind of burdened by it because you're like, I don't know what to post and I don't know how to say it. Yeah. So I think everybody hits that, but a way that I feel like I've tried to overcome it is, I think, the more you put yourself out there, the more doors you have open to you to have conversations around whatever it is that you want to talk about. So, us doing this could spark an idea. And I think a lot of people will look at it as separate things that you did. So like, okay, I spent time and I talked about this in a one-on-one. But you can always take something that's long form and break it down into a lot of snippets. So if we do this one-on-one, we can go back and say, okay, like what are the things Megan and I talked about? And what did we feel like we were riffing on a lot and was like something that was valuable I could talk about? You could then take that, put it into a newsletter. Once you put it into a newsletter is going to be longer than any post. So then from there on your newsletter, you can go through and find the snippets within there. And then you can turn those into tweets or you can turn them into posts or whatever you'd like with them. So I think the trick is, having more conversations at least or consuming content that is like long form. So podcasts or movies or whatever. And then trying to pick out parts of that thing that you liked and then channeling that down the funnel to be like, okay, this little snippet that takes 2 seconds to read, that's an easy tweet that I could put out, or this longer conversation I liked, that's something I could kind of transform into a blog, or I could transform that into a newsletter to put out. So I think that's what's helped me the most. I mean, it's easier said than done for sure, but whenever I get stuck, that's where I go to now, because at this point I have a lot of content out there, so I can go to these blogs that I've put out, or YouTube videos, or conversations we've had, and then I can kind of try to pick those apart and be like, oh yeah, that's actually a good idea. I could talk about something here.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest places personally where I get my content ideas is from conversations like this.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, just of course, like there's a podcast and the blogs and the YouTubes, and I mean, the list can go on, but the things where I learn the most is where I can separate my own ideas. And like talking to you, I've just gotten like 100 ideas and I'm just like, they're going so fast. But these genuine conversations are the best. So Jordan, my last question for you is, you started a newsletter not too long ago, and I would love to be able to tell people what you talk about, and if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So taking kind of our conversation so far, one big thing on social media is there is a lot of long form content, and there's definitely a place for it. But for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, is I've tried to kind of hone in on more of a style that's like quick and concise and gets to the point really quick. So I've translated that over on LinkedIn, where it's a lot of bullet points and it's usually a quick thing that you can consume. And so the same thing with my newsletter. I've done some in the past when I first started, and I didn't really have a cadence with it. And so I felt like what had happened is it launches strong as always, and then it just started diving. And so this time around, when I redid it, I wanted to really try to keep it very concise. I saw some other creators that it must be a popular thing, were really trying to keep it around to 5 minutes. And so I kind of took that same idea where I was like, that's a really good idea. Keep it to 5 minutes to where they know that that's something they can count on. And that's one less thing that they have to worry about when they click into it, to be like, okay, Jordan like email, is this going to be a long thing like the last one he sent? Because I don't want to read that. I just think in today's age, with everything that we have, like the quicker you can get to the point and keep it really actionable for people, the more likely it is that they're going to return to your content, because it's a lot of high value and they didn't have to weed through all the fluff in between to get to the point, right? So that was kind of the idea behind it. I wanted to do that. And then, now being around 5 years in the industry, I think there's a lot of questions that now come my way around the content that I post. So I think as creators and people in general, like you have your own wants, you have things that you want to post and things that you are interested in. And there's definitely a place for that. But what has happened to me on the times that I've failed is I go with that idea, but no one in my audience cares about that idea, right? It's like usually something more where it's like, this is what I like to talk about. And this time around, what I wanted to do was just more, okay, what are the DMs that people send me? And what I started to notice is, okay, a lot of these are just basic 101 stuff that I learned a long time ago and maybe isn't super, super interesting for me to talk about. But if that's the type of people that are showing up for me, then that's the type of content I should start putting out. So that made me more confident to be like, okay, 9 times out of 10, when someone's going to DM me, it's something like what I post, which is, how do I start learning Salesforce? What is Trailhead? How do I do this with the certification? And so my newsletter has been all about that, like just 5 minutes to read or less. And it's one tip on how you can grow your career. And most of the time it's around a topic like that of, hey, this really helped me get my career started when I first started learning Salesforce. So that was the idea behind it.
I love that. I know that you and I both know Ali, the YouTuber. His newsletters are completely, he does it off of Notion, which is really cool to see. But his newsletters are, I think, every Sunday or something like that. And it takes about 5 minutes. And it's just, here's what I did today. Here's something I learned. And then my favorite is like the quotes on the bottom. And I'm just like, easy to the point. I'm excited about your newsletter. Every time it pops up, I click it. So it's working. But yeah. So, that gets a click rate, which is really cool. Gracias, muchas gracias for coming on here and talking to us. And for everybody, you can check out his LinkedIn on the bottom. You can also check out his newsletter. And I would just like to let you have the final words.
Yeah, I would just say at the end here, I really appreciate your time letting me be on here. If there is anybody that is interested, obviously, with the content that I put out, if any of this was intriguing, definitely go to my newsletter. That is like the best place to kind of learn all that. Outside of that, you can go to my blog, and there's a lot of like implementation guides on there. I also do some like one-on-one coaching. So if there's anything as far as like maybe someone you want that's been in the industry for a little bit and a soundboard that you can bounce ideas off of and get a better in-depth idea of what Salesforce is like, you can definitely check that out too. Other than that, like I said, I really appreciate you having me on.
Yay, so excited to have you. Muchas gracias and adios, everybody. Cool. Yay, we did it. Okay.
That was really good.